Ethan Ward had lived most of his life carrying a name that did not belong to him, a name people feared, avoided, and judged without ever knowing the truth. To the world, he was an outlaw. To himself, he was simply a man trying to survive in a place that had never truly given him a chance. He had grown used to traveling alone, keeping his distance from towns and strangers, because he knew how quickly people whispered about him whenever he appeared. The label followed him everywhere, even though the story behind it was far from what people believed. He had been blamed for a mistake that was not his. One wrong moment, one misunderstanding, and suddenly his life had changed. People pointed fingers, and he did not have the power or the influence to prove his innocence. Instead of being heard, he had been pushed into running, and once he began running, it seemed easier to just keep going, rather than fight a battle he could not win. Even though he was called an outlaw, he never felt like one. Inside him lived a quiet voice that reminded him to stay kind, stay thoughtful, and stay true to himself, no matter how others saw him. During his lonely journeys, Ethan found small ways to help others, though he always stayed hidden while doing so. If someone lost a horse, Ethan would find it and return it without leaving his name. If he saw someone in need of food, he would place something nearby secretly. He did not expect appreciation. He only wanted to live with a good heart, even in a world that had shown him more misunderstanding than kindness. This was the life he accepted, and little by little, he adjusted to being no more than a moving shadow in the distance. There were many days when Ethan wished for a chance to explain the truth, or at least to live without constantly watching over his shoulder. But life had made him careful. He learned to read the land better than he could read people. He learned to sleep under the open sky, trusting the calm of nature more than the noise of human judgment. He found peace in quiet places, still lakes, early morning winds, and wide-open areas where he could forget he was someone the world misjudged. One bright morning, the sun rose with a softness that felt unusual. The air was cool, and the wind moved gently across the tall grass as Ethan made his way along a narrow path he had never taken before. He did not have a destination. He simply walked where his heart guided him, hoping someday he would find a place where he could stop running. The land around him slowly changed as he moved further south. The soil grew warmer in color, the plants grew taller, and he sensed he was nearing territory where he did not often travel Apache lands. Ethan never crossed their paths on purpose. He knew enough to respect boundaries and traditions, especially those of the Apache people, who had their own ways, their own rules, and their own values. But the path he followed today was guiding him closer to their home than he expected. Still, he continued, believing that as long as he remained respectful and careful, there would be no trouble. As he walked, his thoughts drifted from place to place, just like he did. He wondered if everyone in the world was always as certain about their judgments as the people who had judged him. He wondered if there would come a day when he could share his story with someone who actually listened. But thinking too deeply often made him feel heavier, and he preferred keeping his mind light. So he focused on the sounds around him, the rustle of leaves, the soft hum of insects, and the way the wind seemed to whisper stories only the land remembered. By midday, Ethan stopped near a small clearing where sunlight rested warmly on the ground. He placed his small bag on the grass and sat down to rest, taking a sip of water and letting the peaceful atmosphere settle around him. The land felt untouched and sacred, and he respected that. He sat quietly, closing his eyes for a moment, when something unusual caught his attention. A faint sound, soft and unsure. It was distant, but it didn't blend with the natural noises around him. It sounded human. Ethan lifted his head slowly, listening more closely. The sound came again soft, almost like a breath mixed with uncertainty. He stood up gently, preparing himself with caution. He had been alone for so long that any unexpected sound made him alert. But this sound did not feel threatening. Instead, it sparked a sense of curiosity inside him. He followed the sound carefully, making sure his footsteps were quiet, his presence respectful. As he moved through the trees, the sound became a little clearer. It carried a tone of worry, but not loud enough to call for help. It was as if the person making the sound did not want to attract attention but could not hide their uneasiness. Ethan continued, feeling a strange pull in his chest, as though something important waited ahead. Then, through the intertwined branches and sunlight, he saw someone. A young woman stood alone near the edge of a narrow ravine. She wore traditional Apache clothing, which made Ethan immediately aware of where he was and how carefully he needed to act. Even from a distance, he noticed her posture alert, tense, as if she had been searching for a way forward, but found none. Her horse was nowhere to be seen, and the tracks on the ground showed signs of her having walked a long way by herself. Ethan froze for a moment. He knew the importance of respect, especially in unfamiliar lands. The young woman looked strong and intelligent, but also somewhat lost. He understood instantly that she was separated from her people. And though he hesitated, unsure of how she might react to his presence, he also knew he couldn't simply walk away. The kindness inside him spoke louder than his fear of misunderstanding. He stepped back slightly, keeping a safe distance, not wanting to surprise her. But before he could decide how to approach, she turned, sensing movement. Their eyes met from afar. Her expression tightened at first, cautious, measured, ready to protect herself if needed. Ethan raised his hands slowly, showing he meant no harm. He did not speak immediately, not wanting to startle her. He simply stood still, allowing her to see him clearly. For a moment, neither of them moved. The wind passed between them, carrying dust and silence. Ethan watched her with respectful calm, and she studied him with careful eyes. In that moment, something gentle shifted in the air. Not trust. Not yet. But perhaps the first small crack in the wall between strangers. Ethan knew his life had been full of unexpected turns, but something about this moment felt different. It felt like the beginning of a change he could not yet understand. The land around them held its breath, as if waiting to see what would happen next. And without knowing it, Ethan Ward had just stepped into the moment that would change his destiny forever. Ethan stood still, keeping a gentle distance, while the young Apache woman continued to watch him carefully. The quiet moment between them stretched longer than he expected. He could see she was alert, prepared to react if he made the wrong move. Ethan understood her caution. After all, he was a stranger in her land, and strangers were not welcomed easily. But he also sensed something else in her eyes. Fatigue. Maybe even a little uncertainty, as though she had been trying to be strong for a long time, and was now reaching the limit of her strength. He spoke first, his voice calm and low. He didn't step closer. He simply allowed his words to drift gently through the air, so she could hear them without feeling threatened. He said he meant no harm and was only passing through the area. The woman did not respond immediately, but she did not turn away either. She listened, watching his body language, judging whether his words matched his behavior. Ethan kept his hands visible and made sure every movement he made was slow and respectful. After a few moments, she finally spoke, though her voice was soft and respectful. She asked who he was and why he was there. Ethan answered honestly, telling her he was traveling and did not wish to cause trouble. He did not mention anything about the label people gave him. He felt it was not the right moment to share such a complicated part of his past. Instead, he focused on the present, their unexpected meeting, and the gentle chance that lay between them. Ethan noticed the way her eyes moved across the land behind him, as if she were checking to see if he was alone. He told her he traveled by himself, and she seemed to relax just a little. Not completely, but enough to let him know she was beginning to see him, not as a danger, but as someone she could listen to. He then asked if she was lost or needed help, though he spoke with genuine politeness, not wanting her to think he was assuming she couldn't manage on her own. At first, she didn't answer. It seemed difficult for her to admit anything. But after a quiet breath, she explained that she had been separated from her group earlier in the day. Her horse had been startled by something, and before she could calm it, the animal had run off with her supplies. By the time she regained control of the situation, she was already far from the path she knew well. She had been walking for hours trying to find her way. But the land here looked different, and she was unsure which direction would lead her back home. Ethan listened with full attention, nodding slowly as she spoke. He could hear the strength in her voice, and he could also hear the small tremble hidden beneath it, something only someone who paid close attention would notice. She was brave, determined, but also tired. The sun had been strong, and walking alone in unfamiliar territory could make even the strongest person feel lost. He looked at the surrounding land for a moment. Though he had traveled through many places, this area was not one he knew well. But he still felt certain that together they could find a way forward. He told her gently that he would help her find her group if she allowed him to walk with her. She lowered her eyes briefly, thinking, in her culture, trust was given carefully and only earned through respect and sincerity. Ethan knew that. He waited quietly, letting her choose without pressure. After a few moments of silence, she agreed, but she made it clear she would walk slightly ahead so she could guide the direction. Ethan accepted this without hesitation. He admired her dignity and independence. She stepped forward, and he followed at a comfortable distance that made her feel safe. Their journey began with quiet steps, each one creating a small connection between two very different worlds. As they walked, Ethan noticed how gracefully she moved through the land. She walked with a rhythm that seemed to match the wind itself, stepping lightly but surely. Her name, he later learned, was Nadina. She shared it after some time had passed. Once she felt a bit more comfortable with him, Ethan repeated her name softly, feeling its beauty settle in his mind. Nadina walked ahead with steady steps, and Ethan followed, grateful that she trusted him enough to let him accompany her. The sun began to lower in the sky, casting longer shadows across the land. Nadina paused occasionally, looking for familiar signs, certain trees, certain stones, certain patterns in the earth that her people had used for generations. Ethan admired the way she used her senses, noticing things he never would have seen alone. She was connected to the land in a way that felt natural, almost as if the earth spoke to her through small, quiet messages. After an hour of walking, Nadina slowed down and glanced back at Ethan. She asked him where he came from and why he traveled alone. Ethan took a slow breath, wondering how much to share. He chose to be honest, but simple. He told her his life had pushed him into traveling without a home. He didn't say anything about being blamed for something he didn't do. He simply said he had learned to rely on the land and his own steps, because that was the only way he knew to keep going. Nadina listened without judgment. She did not ask unnecessary questions. She simply nodded, showing she understood the quiet loneliness of someone who lived between places. Her respectful silence made Ethan feel seen in a way he hadn't felt in years. She did not treat him like a stranger or a threat. She treated him like a person with a story worth hearing. The journey continued. They shared small pieces of themselves carefully, slowly, like two people placing stones in a gentle pattern, building trust without rushing. Ethan told her about the places he had seen, wide lakes that glowed like silver in the morning light, quiet forests where every sound felt like a whisper, small villages where people lived simple but content lives. Nadina told him about her people, their respect for the land, their traditions, their gatherings full of music, stories, and warmth. She spoke of her family, her elders, and the lessons she had learned since childhood. As the afternoon turned to evening, the air softened, and the world felt calmer. Nadina stopped near a small ridge, looking out deeply at the distant horizon. Ethan stood beside her, maintaining a respectful space. She pointed gently to a faint trail far ahead, one that Ethan would have overlooked completely. She said that trail might lead back to her people if they followed it before night fell. Ethan nodded and encouraged her to lead the way. Their footsteps became more unified now, the distance between them naturally closing as they began to trust one another more. Nadina walked with renewed hope, and Ethan felt grateful to be part of this moment. The land around them glowed softly with the warm colors of evening, and the quiet bond between them grew stronger with each step. Ethan felt something new inside him, something he had not felt in a long time: purpose, connection, and the gentle beginning of trust. Nadina, too, felt something shift within her. She had seen many travelers before, but none had approached her with the same calm respect Ethan showed. She noticed his patience, the way he observed the world quietly, and the kindness in his voice. Though neither of them said it aloud, they both sensed that their paths had crossed for a reason. This journey was more than simply walking back to her people. It was the start of something neither of them could fully understand yet. The land stretched endlessly before them, but for the first time in a long while, Ethan did not feel alone. Nadina did not feel afraid. They walked together, guided by trust, the setting sun, and a quiet connection that was beginning to shape both of their destinies. The sun continued to sink lower on the horizon as Ethan and Nadina followed the faint trail she had pointed out. The sky slowly shifted into soft shades of orange and pink, giving the land a warm and peaceful glow. The air felt cooler now, brushing gently against their faces as they walked. Neither of them spoke for a while, but the silence between them was comfortable, not heavy. It felt like they were settling into a quiet understanding. Step by step, Ethan walked a few paces behind her, letting her guide the direction. He watched how she studied the land with care, stopping every now and then to observe a distant tree, the shape of a hill, or the pattern of the soil. She moved like someone who respected the land deeply, someone who understood its language better than most. Ethan admired that. He had traveled many places, but his connection to the land came from survival. Hers came from belonging. After a while, Nadina slowed her steps and glanced behind her. "You can walk beside me," she said softly. "You do not need to follow from far." Ethan gave a small smile and nodded. He walked forward until they were side by side, still keeping a comfortable space between them. It felt different walking next to her, as if their journey had shifted to something more shared, more equal. The small change brought a gentle warmth to Ethan's heart. The trail became less clear as they approached a cluster of tall grass. Nadina paused and leaned down, touching the ground lightly with her fingers. Ethan watched her examine the slightest marks, things he would never notice on his own. After a moment, she stood up and said the trail continued toward a group of low hills in the distance. Ethan trusted her judgment without question. As they walked, the soft light of evening guided their way. Nadina spoke first this time, her voice calm and thoughtful. She said she appreciated Ethan's patience and the way he respected her space. Ethan responded with equal sincerity, saying he admired her strength and courage. Nadina lowered her gaze for a moment, a shy smile appearing softly. Compliments were not something she received often, and hearing one so gently offered made her heart feel lighter. They walked on, and the land around them began to change. The tall grasses gave way to patches of desert flowers, scattered across the ground like tiny colorful stars. The wind carried a faint floral scent, and Ethan breathed it in, feeling refreshed. Nadina pointed out a small plant nearby, explaining that her people used it to make a calming tea. She spoke with such knowledge that Ethan found himself wanting to learn more. He listened carefully to everything she shared, the meaning behind certain plants, the way her people read the sky, and the small lessons she had learned from elders throughout her life. Ethan realized that Nadina didn't just see the land. She understood it with a depth he had never seen before. Her wisdom made him feel like he was walking beside someone truly remarkable. As they moved closer to the low hills, the path became slightly uneven. Ethan offered his hand gently, not forcing her to take it, just giving her the option. Nadina looked at his hand for a brief moment before placing her own lightly in his. Her touch was soft, and Ethan felt a calmness settle inside him. Once they reached even ground again, Nadina let go, but the warmth of her hand lingered in his mind. The sky deepened into shades of purple, and stars began appearing one by one, like small lights decorating the night. They decided to rest for a little while before continuing. Nadina found a flat rock near a small patch of bushes, and they sat down together. The air was cool but pleasant. Ethan took out his small water flask and offered it to her. She accepted it politely, taking a small sip before handing it back. For a moment, they simply watched the sky, quiet and content. Ethan felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. He was used to living with worry and the weight of his past, but here, with Nadina, that heaviness seemed to fade. He didn't feel judged or feared. He felt understood. even without saying much. Nadina glanced at him gently. "You travel alone," she said. "Does it ever feel heavy?" Her question surprised him. Not because of the words, but because of how deeply they reached into his heart. He took a slow breath. "Sometimes," he admitted, "but the land has been kind to me. And moments like this, walking with someone who understands the world quietly, those moments make the road feel lighter." Well-peated Bolsar. Well-peated Bolsarded. And well-peated Bolsarded. Well-peated Bolsarded. Well-peated Bolsarded. Well-peated Bolsarded Bolsarded. Well-peated Bolsard. Nadina's eyes softened. She understood more than he had expected. She shared that she often walked alone too, exploring areas around her village, or learning from the land in silence. Though she belonged to a community, she had always enjoyed spending time in wide-open places, listening to the world around her. She said she felt connected to nature more deeply when she was alone, but today had shown her that sharing a journey with someone could also feel meaningful. Their conversation flowed gently, like a calm stream. They talked about simple things, favorite places, childhood memories, and the lessons they carried with them. The more they shared, the lighter their steps felt. The bond between them was not rushed. It formed slowly and naturally, shaped by honesty, respect, and the quiet understanding they were building. After resting, they continued walking, guided now by the soft glow of the moon. The night was peaceful, and the sounds of small animals moving in the distance created a soothing background rhythm. Ethan noticed Nadina walking a little closer now, their steps almost matching. Each time their shoulders came near, he felt a small spark of warmth, not overwhelming, just gentle and comforting. The hills they approached seemed larger now in the moonlight. Nadina explained that beyond those hills, there were paths her people often used. If they could reach that area, she believed they would find signs of her group footprints, familiar markers, or even the smoke from their resting camp. Hearing the hope in her voice made Ethan feel motivated to continue at her pace. When they reached the top of the first hill, they paused to look at the land below. The moon shone brightly, revealing gentle slopes and scattered trees. Nadina scanned the area carefully, her eyes trained to catch even the smallest detail. Ethan watched her in admiration. Her focus, her calm strength, and the quiet determination in her expression made him feel grateful to be part of this journey. Finally, Nadina pointed toward a faint mark on the ground, a sign she recognized. It was something only someone from her tribe could identify. Her face brightened with relief. "We are close," she said softly, almost with a sigh of gratitude. Ethan felt that same relief, but also something unexpected, a small tug in his chest, realizing their time alone together was nearing its end. The journey back had become meaningful in ways he had not anticipated. He didn't want to lose the connection they had built, but he also knew her people's safety and her return home were the most important things right now. As they walked down the hill, Nadina slowed her steps again, as if she too felt the moment changing. She looked at Ethan, her expression calm but thoughtful. "I am glad our paths crossed today," she said quietly. "So am I," Ethan replied, his voice sincere and warm. They continued forward, side by side, their trust now deepened by everything they had shared. They were close to her people, but something new had already begun between them, a bond formed gently, step by step, across quiet land and open sky. And though neither of them said it aloud, they both felt it growing, guiding them toward a future neither could have imagined that morning. Ethan and Nadina walked down the hill with steady steps, guided by the soft moonlight and the signs Nadina had recognized on the land. The night was calm, and the sky glowed with scattered stars, making everything feel peaceful and almost magical. Even though they were getting closer to her people, neither of them rushed. Their steps felt thoughtful, as if they both sensed that these moments together were precious. Nadina continued to lead the way, but now she walked much closer to Ethan than before. There was a quiet comfort between them, something that had grown slowly but strongly during their journey. The gentle silence around them felt warm, not empty. Ethan glanced at her from time to time, noticing the calm determination in her expression. He admired her even more now, her courage, her patience, and her deep connection to the land. As they traveled further, The land began to show clearer signs of human presence. The ground held footprints here and there, and the faint remains of old campfire marks lay scattered near a wide clearing. Nadina stopped for a moment and crouched down, touching one of the footprints gently with her fingers. Her eyes softened. "My people passed through here," she said quietly. Ethan nodded, feeling relieved. He could see in her face that she was finally certain they were going the right way. Nadina stood up again and looked around, taking a slow breath. "We are close now. Maybe an hour more of walking." Ethan smiled softly. "Then, let's keep going," he said. They continued along the trail, their steps moving together naturally. With each step, the bond between them seemed to grow stronger. Even though neither of them spoke much about it, the land felt peaceful, as if it were guiding them forward with gentle hands. After some time, the faint glow of a fire appeared far ahead. It was small, but enough to be seen through the thin cluster of trees in front of them. Nadina's steps slowed for a moment, and Ethan could see a mixture of relief and emotion cross her face. Returning home was always meaningful, but returning after being lost held a deeper feeling. Ethan watched her quietly. "You're almost home," he said gently. Nadina turned to him, her eyes warm. "Yes, and I'm grateful you walked with me." Her words touched him more deeply than she realized. Ethan felt a soft ache in his chest, like something shifting inside him. He nodded, unable to find the right words. Sometimes silence expressed more than language could. As they moved closer to the firelight, Nadina adjusted her posture, becoming more composed. Ethan understood. She was getting ready to step into her world again. Her people, her family, her traditions. He felt slightly unsure of how he would be received, but he reminded himself that he had done nothing wrong. All he had done was help someone who needed it. They reached the edge of the Apache camp just as the moon reached its peak. The camp was peaceful, with small fires burning softly and a few figures moving quietly between the tents. Nadina paused and looked at Ethan one last time before stepping forward. "Stay a little behind me," she said kindly. "My people will want to see me first." Ethan nodded. "I understand." She gave him a small, grateful smile and walked ahead with steady steps. When she entered the open space of the camp, several people looked up immediately. Their expressions changed from surprise to deep relief as they recognized her. An older woman, likely a family member, hurried forward and embraced Nadina tightly, her eyes full of emotion. Others gathered around, offering gentle words, checking that she was unharmed. Nadina spoke softly to them, explaining that she was safe. Then, as the crowd calmed, she glanced back toward Ethan. Her gaze was steady, and she lifted her hand slightly in a gesture, asking him to come forward. Ethan stepped into the light. The moment he entered the open space, almost every eye turned toward him. Some faces showed curiosity, others caution, and a few simply seemed surprised to see an outsider walking into their camp alongside Nadina. Ethan kept his posture respectful, making sure none of his movements appeared bold or disrespectful. He lowered his gaze slightly and waited quietly. Nadina stepped forward again, placing herself between Ethan and the gathering group. Her voice was clear and calm as she addressed them. She explained how she had been separated from her horse and had lost her way. She told them how Ethan had found her and guided her safely across the land without hesitation or expectation. She spoke of his patience, his respectful behavior, and his kindness during their journey. The people listened carefully. Ethan could see their expressions shift as Nadina continued speaking. Her words carried weight. Her people trusted her, valued her judgment, and respected her honesty. If she spoke highly of someone, they listened with open hearts. The chief of the camp, an older man with wise eyes, stepped forward. He stood tall, his gaze steady as he looked at Ethan. The silence felt heavy for a moment, though not in a threatening way. It felt like an important pause, a moment meant for understanding rather than fear. "You helped one of ours," the chief said calmly. Ethan nodded slowly. "She needed guidance, and I was there." The chief studied him for a moment. "You walked through our land, but you walked with respect." Ethan lowered his head slightly, acknowledging the truth of his words. Nadina stepped closer to the chief and spoke quietly. "He is not what people might think at first glance. He carries a heavy past, but his heart is good." Ethan felt a warmth spread through his chest hearing her say those words. She understood him more than most people ever had. The chief turned his gaze toward Nadina, then back at Ethan. After a thoughtful silence, he spoke. "You are welcome here as a guest. You will stay tonight and rest. You have earned that." Ethan let out a breath he didn't realize he had been holding. Nadina's face brightened with a soft relief. She looked at Ethan with pride, as if she was glad her words had reached her people's hearts. The others around the camp nodded among themselves. Some even offered gentle smiles. Ethan felt something unusual. He felt accepted, even among people who had every right to be cautious. He followed Nadina as she guided him toward the campfire. She introduced him to her family, each greeting him with polite nods or warm expressions. Ethan felt a strange but comforting sensation settle inside him. This camp, filled with soft firelight, quiet voices, and calm faces, felt more peaceful than any place he had visited in a long time. As the night grew deeper, food was shared, stories were quietly exchanged, and the warmth of the fire wrapped around everyone. Ethan sat near Nadina, feeling like he belonged somewhere for the first time in years. She stayed close to him, as if she wanted him to know he wasn't alone anymore. Under the open sky, surrounded by people who had welcomed him with care, Ethan felt something change within him. He wasn't just an outsider passing through. He wasn't the outlaw people whispered about. Here, he was simply a man who had helped someone, and in return, had been treated with kindness he had long forgotten. And as he looked at Nadina, her face calm, her eyes warm, he felt a quiet certainty growing inside him. This was not the end of a journey. It was the beginning of something new, something he never thought he would find. The months that followed became the most surprising chapter of his life. A chapter he never expected to live. The man who once lived on the run now woke up each day with peace in his heart. He had never known such calm before. The Apache camp, which once felt unfamiliar and dangerous to him, now felt like a home built from trust, warmth, and quiet understanding. Each day added another layer to the bond he shared with the young woman he had rescued, and each day he felt himself changing from the inside. He was no longer the stranger who stood unsure among their people. Now, when he walked through the village, the children called his name with joy. The elders smiled with approval, and the warriors nodded toward him with respect. These small gestures carried great meaning for him. They felt like gifts he didn't ask for but deeply valued. He had never received such acceptance before, and it softened parts of him he once believed would stay hard forever. Life in the camp moved at a gentle rhythm. Each morning, he helped gather wood or repair tools. The work was simple, but it felt meaningful. The people worked together like a single family, each person contributing something that helped everyone. He admired that way of living. It was not built on fear or greed. It was built on cooperation, kindness, and shared responsibility. For the first time, he understood what community truly meant. And then there was the young woman who had changed his journey entirely. She moved like a quiet breeze, graceful and warm. She always seemed to know what others needed before they said a word. He admired her strength, but he also admired her gentle nature. The way she spoke, the way she smiled, and the way she looked at the world. When she looked at him, he felt seen in a way he had never felt before. She did not see the outlaw he had been. She saw the man he was becoming. Their friendship slowly grew into a companionship that felt deeper than either expected. They talked often, sometimes about simple things, sometimes about important things. She asked about his past, not to judge him but to understand him. He told her only what he felt comfortable sharing, and she listened with patience. In return, she shared stories of her people, stories of strength, tradition, and deep connection to nature. They discovered how different their lives had been, and yet how similar their hopes were. One evening, As the sun dipped behind the hills, casting long golden light across the sky, the two of them sat beside a small stream. The sound of water flowing made everything feel calm. She spoke about her dreams, how she wished to bring peace between different groups, how she believed understanding was more powerful than fear, and how she wanted to help her people move forward while still holding on to their traditions. Her words touched him deeply. He realized she had a clear vision for her life. And he also realized that, somehow, he wanted to be part of it. She turned toward him that evening and said softly that she felt safe around him. No one had ever said such words to him before. Safety was not something he ever thought he could give someone. Hearing that changed him. It made him understand that his strength could be used not for escape or survival alone, but also for protecting others and building a better future. As the days passed, their relationship quietly deepened. The people around them noticed the way they spoke to each other, the way they walked side by side, and the way their eyes searched for each other whenever something important happened. The elders began to whisper, and the younger ones smiled knowingly. It was clear the two shared a bond that went beyond simple friendship. One morning, the village held a gathering. The air was filled with excitement. The elders called everyone together, and the whole community sat in a circle, waiting for an announcement. He did not know what the meeting was about until he saw the young woman stand among the elders. She looked calm, but hopeful. Then an elder spoke in a warm voice, telling the people that the young woman had chosen her future partner, someone she trusted, someone she believed had a good heart, someone who had shown great courage and kindness. There was a long pause. The elder smiled gently, and then turned toward him. She had chosen him. The moment felt unreal. His heart pounded in his chest, not from fear, but from something new, something he did not yet have words for. The people looked at him with welcoming eyes, encouraging him to step forward. The young woman met his gaze with a calm, warm expression, as if telling him silently that he did not need to be afraid. He walked forward slowly, feeling the weight of the moment. When he reached her, she took his hand. Her hand was gentle, yet there was strength in the way she held him. The crowd around them cheered softly, celebrating the choice she had made. He had thought many times in his life that he was destined to be alone, drifting between towns, always running from his past. But now, in front of all these people, he realized he had found something rare, something people searched for their whole lives. After the ceremony, the camp celebrated. There was singing, dancing, and joyful laughter everywhere. He felt overwhelmed by how easily the people included him in these moments. The young woman stayed by his side, smiling often, speaking with him, guiding him gently so he never felt lost in the traditions he was still learning. She made everything easier. As the night grew quieter, the two of them walked together away from the center of the celebration. The sky was full of stars, shining brightly above them. She told him that she believed their paths were meant to cross, that he had come into her life not by chance but by a greater purpose. Her words made his heart feel full. He had never thought of life in such a meaningful way, but now, with her beside him, everything felt possible. He promised her that he would honor the trust she had placed in him. He told her he wanted to build a peaceful life, not just for himself, but with her. She smiled softly, telling him she believed in him fully. That belief gave him strength he didn't know he had. It made him want to be better, kinder, and more patient. It made him want to grow. In the days that followed, they began to build a life together one step at a time. They created a small home filled with warmth. They worked side by side, helping the community, taking part in the traditions, learning from the elders, and teaching children small lessons about courage and kindness. The man who had once run from everything now found himself running toward the future with excitement. He discovered that love did not always come loudly. Sometimes it arrived quietly, through shared work, gentle conversations, and steady trust. He discovered that family was not only a matter of blood, sometimes it was a matter of choice. And he discovered that a person could rebuild themselves, no matter how broken their past had been, as long as they were willing to change. Years later, when he looked back at the journey that had brought him to this point, He felt grateful. Grateful for the difficult moments that had shaped him. Grateful for the kind people who had given him a chance. And most of all, grateful for the young woman who had seen good in him even when he could not see it himself. He was no longer an outlaw. He was a protector, a trusted member of the community, a partner, and eventually, a father. His past no longer controlled him. His present was filled with peace, and his future held endless possibilities. This transformation became the greatest story of his life, a story of change, of trust, of love, and of a man who found his true home, not by searching for it, but by earning it through kindness, courage, and an open heart.